A gunshot suddenly rang out in the office. The woman turned around and realized the gunshot came from the bot's office. She rushed in and found that the bot had been shot by a student who came to visit, killed in a baffling way. As time passed, a week flew by in the blink of an eye. The company fell into a state where no one was managing it, and the employees weren't being paid. Both Yen and Chris, the two who tried to hold on until the end, had also prepared to find a new company. Suddenly, a strange man appeared, saying he wanted to meet the bot to discuss business. Yen thought he didn't know the bot had died, and was about to politely see the guest out. Oh right, he killed those children and then shot himself. Seeing this, Chris hurriedly corrected her, saying that the bot never harmed anyone but was killed by one of those students. The man didn't care about the truth. He walked straight to the stairs and then suddenly stopped. Could you give me a hand? Chris found it hard to refuse, so he hurried over to carry the man's bag. Then the man said he wasn't good at climbing stairs, leaned on Chris, and together, they went up. Yen felt something was off and hurried after them, cautiously asking the man what he was going upstairs to do. The man mumbled that her bot had signed a trust agreement with him before he died. The gist of it was that from now on he would take over the company. Then, ignoring Yen's attempts to stop him, the man directly tore off the seal on the bot's office door and brazenly walked in. He began pulling open each window curtain. Chris helplessly reminded him that the company was now nearly shut down, with no business left to run. The man, after opening all the curtains, told them to immediately notify all employees that at 9 o'clock the next morning there would be a company-wide meeting. Then he took a stack of documents out of his bag, saying it was the trust agreement the bot had signed with him. The two took the documents outside and examined them carefully, and indeed saw the bot's signature. But the only heir of the company after the bot's death was the bot's mother. She was in Busan and didn't know English. They looked it over again and again but still couldn't understand what this man had come to their company to do. What they found even stranger was that the next day, when all the employees were summoned to the company-wide meeting, the man said only a few words of thanks, then abruptly changed his tone. Those working remotely have 1 hour to get here. If not, their employment contract will be terminated. That's it. With that he turned and left, without looking back. This scene left all the employees below stunned. They'd never met such a bizarre bot, so everyone returned to their seats, curiously searching for the man's name online. Yen had just hung up the phone when she saw the man standing on the second floor, seemingly thinking about something. She curiously approached and asked if he needed any help. In response, the man asked her a question that left her not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What business does this company even do? It turned out he had no idea what the company did. Yen patiently explained the company's business. The man suddenly said he smelled something strange, and even leaned in close to Yen to sniff back and forth. Luckily the foul smell wasn't coming from Yen. Just then the man jolted and said time was up, and hurried downstairs. He didn't care whether the employees behind had all come in yet, and just locked the company's main door. Let her in. I gave them all 1 hour. She's standing right outside. Why should I make an exception for her? How is this employee any different from the others? Yen was caught off guard by the man's sharp retort and was momentarily speechless. Then, she went to Chris to complain about the new bot. To her surprise, Chris announced that the company had just transferred salaries. This proved that the man had really taken over the company. However, what puzzled Chris was that despite trying to search online, he still couldn't find any information about this man, as if he had never existed. Yen also felt that the man's takeover of the company was strange, so she decided to investigate his background. Yen and Chris had just returned to the company when they found the man had called all employees to the door to line up so he could smell them. While the man was busy, Yen sneaked into the office and searched through his bag. She found not only the date of signing the trust agreement but also a business card of the man. Then she looked up information about the company based on the name on the card. The result that came up completely shocked her. It turned out that before, there was also 11 IO of another company who, after signing a trust agreement with this man, also suddenly lost his head in a mysterious way. Then Yen and Chris quietly went to the surveillance room. They checked the entry and exit history of the man based on the signing date in the trust agreement, but found that on that day he came without any prior appointment with the bot, because he had to wait in the reception area for a whole hour. What Yen and Chris found puzzling was that this man entered the bot's office for less than 5 minutes before the bot signed the trust agreement in an inexplicable, strange way. What's more, afterward the bot even went over to the man and did inexplicable things. At the same time, after smelling all the employees on the second floor, the man finally found the employee with the odor. He gave that employee two choices: either no longer let him smell the body odor, or pack up and leave the company immediately. This employee had to choose the first option. He brought a bucket of soap back to the office, took off all his clothes, and began trying to scrub off the body odor with soapy water. If we look closely, we can see on the soap bucket there is a line of text, the man's name. Patoff. At 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, the phone suddenly rang nonstop. Yen hurriedly picked it up to look. It was Pat, the one who had just taken over the company. She thought something urgent was happening at the company and immediately answered alertly. The result: I'm calling to ask if you can come to the office a little earlier than usual. Is that okay? Yen patiently told Pat that if it was urgent she could come to the company at 8 o'clock. Unexpectedly, Pat angrily hung up immediately. Yen didn't understand what she had done wrong. She couldn't even be bothered to care anymore and was about to go back to sleep when the phone rang again. Yen helplessly answered, and it was Pap again, who had just hung up. Clearly, if she didn't come right away, Pap wouldn't leave her alone. So she immediately set off for the company. On the way she opened her phone and recorded the following message: I'm Yen. If anything happens to me, this message will be sent from Mike Sao. When Yen hurried to the company, Pap complained that she came too late. Yen tried to explain that she lived quite far, but Pap not only knew her home address but also rattled off the names of her two roommates. Only then did Yen realize Pap was holding her entire personnel file. She didn't understand why he held her file and called her to the company in the middle of the night like this. Just then, Frank from the admin department pushed the door open and walked in. It turned out Pap had not only called Yen to the company at midnight but also sent Frank to buy breakfast for him. After Frank delivered the breakfast and left the office, Yen patiently sat down to wait and see what Pap actually wanted from her. Then Pap made a request that Yen couldn't believe. He said there was a flight coming from Seoul to Los Angeles, and on the plane was the former bot's mother, Mrs. N. He didn't want that flight to land in Los Angeles. Yen was completely dumbfounded. Could she shoot down a plane or make it turn around midway? Obviously she couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, Chris arrived at the company and learned that the project they had developed over half a year had been cancelled by Pap for no clear reason. He was furious and decided to go confront Pap to settle it. But on the way, Chris was stopped by Yen. She told him about the bot's mother coming to the company, which made Chris regain hope in the company and drop the idea of quitting. The scene shifts to an older woman, an Asian woman entering the company. She said something in Korean to the receptionist, but the receptionist didn't understand what she was saying. Just then Yen noticed this Korean woman. She hurried over and led Mrs. N to the reception area. Pap also stepped out of the office and gathered everyone in the main hall to solemnly introduce the arrival of Mrs. N. Then he unexpectedly spoke in fluent Korean. Let us bear your pain. Next he invited Mrs. N upstairs to read a eulogy before all the staff, then hurriedly invited her into his office. Meanwhile, Yen went to see Frank in the admin department, asking her to book a hotel room per company policy for Mrs. N. And, when Pap took Mrs. N away, the receptionist gave the hotel address to him. However, what Yen didn't expect was that when she got off work and went to find Chris, she saw him copying the surveillance footage that recorded Pap forcing the bot to kneel. Yen hurriedly stopped Chris, but Chris insisted on giving the 60 to Mrs. N, hoping she would drag Pap out, otherwise he would quit the next day. Seeing this, Yen couldn't sway Chris, so she decided to give the 60 to Mrs. N herself. But when she went to the booked hotel and asked the receptionist for Mrs. N's room number, she discovered that Pap hadn't brought her there at all. Then she called Pat, who had returned to the company, pretending to represent all the staff in giving flowers to Mrs. N, and asked for her room number. In response, Pap told her that Mrs. N wasn't at the booked hotel but had found somewhere else to stay. Yen immediately felt something was wrong and hurriedly asked Pap where Mrs. N had gotten out of the car. Pap only remembered that there was a small swan-shaped boat. Yen immediately thought of a park nearby. She rushed to the park to ask passersby about Mrs. N, but got nothing. Yen worriedly called Chris to say that Mrs. N might have been killed by Pap. At the same time, Pap took the elevator down to the company's OVO room. He walked past rows of servers to an inconspicuous small door in the corner. Pap took out a bunch of keys from his pocket, unlocked the door, and stepped into a pitch-dark room. One day Chris stood below, quietly looking up for a long while. Pap was also standing on the second floor looking down at him. Chris suddenly came up with a brilliant idea. He hurriedly returned to his seat and began calculating how much weight would be needed to break the glass above to make that hateful bot Pap fall from the second floor. So, he worked overtime to write a gam, using the gam to simulate the feasibility. But he didn't expect Pap to quietly appear behind him. Pap not only praised his gam idea, but was also eager to try it. Just like that, Chris, who had decided to quit, was unexpectedly favored by Pap. He quickly finished the gam and let Pap try it. Pap was as delighted as a child. To reward Chris's work, Pap decided to take him to a secret club for entertainment, but they were stopped by the receptionist at the door. Then, Pap remembered the dress code. He took Chris to the changing room next door, asking him to change into a suit as required. After changing, Chris entered the secret club with Pap. Inside were all beautiful people. Just as Chris was still amazed, Pap used greeting friends as an excuse, left Chris alone, and hurried off. Chris, inexperienced in the world, went to the bar to order a drink. He accidentally saw a woman not far away smiling mysteriously at him. Chris then ordered 2 drinks and went to the woman's table. Sitting down, he noticed the woman not only wore a fake chin but one of her arms was also fake. Then Pap sat down beside the woman. Seeing Pap and Mila being intimate, Chris tactfully got up and left. He went to the restroom and called Yen to ask whether Pap had ever worked for a company that manufactured prosthetics. He felt that Mila's prosthetic arm might have been supplied by Pap. Then he came out of the restroom and returned to his seat, but Mila was no longer beside Pap. She was standing and chatting happily with someone else. Only then did Chris clearly see that Mila also had a prosthetic leg. Just then Pap saw a man in the distance, nod at him, and told Chris that he had to go help a friend with something, asking if Chris wanted to come along. Chris drank down his drink and noticed that the drink, which was blue earlier, had now turned dark red. Although he realized the drink was suspicious, Chris still followed Pap out of the club. Once outside, he suddenly remembered his jacket was still inside. "We'll come back. Sit in the front. I've sent the driver home." They had just gotten into Pap's car, and before Chris could even understand where they were going, suddenly a few big men threw a bag with a living person into the car. Chris didn't know what was happening and, terrified, wanted Pap to let him out of the car, but it was too late. Before Chris could understand what was going on, Pap had hit the gas and sped off, ignoring Chris's barrage of questions, and began racing down the streets. Just then Chris's panic disorder suddenly flared up. He couldn't breathe, his face turned red, tears streaming. Luckily Pap opened the car window in time, helping Chris regain some calm. He hurriedly asked who the person in the car was, but Pap only told him that it was the culprit who killed your bot. Chris immediately realized something was wrong. Could the one in the bag be that young kid? He hurriedly asked Pap to untie the boy, but Pap turned and asked Chris in return, "Have you never thought about taking revenge for your bot?" This question left Chris completely stunned. He no longer cared what Pap intended to do with the boy, he just wanted Pap to stop the car and let him out immediately. Just then the car happened to drive onto an overpass. Pap couldn't stop the car on the bridge. "We have to stop for gas," and then they came off the bridge to a gas station. While Pap went inside to pay, Chris hurriedly found a paper cutter in the car, quickly cut the ropes, and opened the package to look, but the person inside wasn't the boy, but Mila, the one he had met at the club. Chris didn't understand why Pap said Mila was the culprit who killed the bot. Then Mila jumped out of the car, turned and said to him, "If you want to know his background, find Frank Redmond." Then she fled and vanished. Right then Pap finished paying and came back to the car, seeing Chris had let Mila escape. He said that Mila was his sister and he intended to take Mila home, yet Chris had let her go on his own. Pap considered Chris an untrustworthy employee and left him at the gas station, then drove off. The next morning, Chris remembered his jacket was still at the club, so he went there to retrieve it. He curiously stepped inside and saw the club, which last night was brightly lit, had now turned into an office. Chris didn't understand what was going on and had to go back to the company and try to find where Redmond, the one Mila mentioned, was. But the search returned over 1,000 people with the same name. Clearly, searching this way he would never find Redmond, the one who understood Pap well. So Chris went straight to Pap's office, using the excuse of letting Pap try the game to install hacking software on his phone. After getting Redmond's information from the contacts, the next day, he called in sick and went to Redmond's jewelry shop. Chris planned to probe for information about Pap tactfully, but as soon as the old man heard Pap's full name, he pressed the shop security door button, locking Chris inside. Chris didn't understand what was happening and hurriedly explained that he meant no harm, but the old man said cryptically, "He doesn't exist." Chris thought the old man was bending down to draw a gun, and fearfully stepped back, telling the old man not to be agitated. The old man asked, back in disbelief, "Have you met him?" "That very man. You meet him every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then the old man invited him into his workshop and told she to read between himself and Pap. About 10 years earlier, a female doctor came to the shop of the old man and asked him to use gold to cast a strange object according to a drawing she provided. At first the old man didn't know what it was, he just followed the drawing, strictly and meticulously polished every detail. But upon delivery, the old man for the first time saw Pap's full name on the document the woman handed over. Over the next 3 years, continuously many different people came to the old man's shop, asking him to cast bizarre things, according to drawings, and on the documents they handed over all bore Pap's signature. Then as the cast objects grew larger, the old man finally discovered that something was wrong. It turned out the things they asked him to cast were skeletons, of all sizes. But because he was paid generously, at the time the old man didn't pay much attention. To complete the continuous orders, the old man was forced to use up all the gold in the shop, and even had to melt down his wife's gold ring to have enough. After completing the golden skull, in the end he had cast a total of 205 orders large and small. Since then, those people never appeared again, and from then on the people around the old man died one after another, until, in the end, only he was left, living alone in the world. The old man believed that those golden skeletons must be inside Pap's body. "How much does he weigh?" Meanwhile, Chris's girlfriend suddenly came to the company. It turned out he hadn't told his girlfriend that he'd called in sick today. Worried about being exposed, Yen hurriedly said Chris was in a meeting and successfully sent Patty away, but Pap was already waiting at the door. Learning her boyfriend had called in sick without telling her, and was covered for by Yen, Patty angrily left, but unluckily, her car broke down right then. Just then Pap appeared outside the car window. "I can call a mechanic for you. You can wait in the company for me here, that's fine. It's so hot. Without air conditioning the sushi you brought will spoil quickly." Patty helplessly returned to the company. But Pap, who was normally stern, was especially friendly with Patty. The two chatted very happily. Pap even showed special interest in Patty's job as a cosmetic surgeon. When the car was fixed, Patty was about to leave when she saw Pap struggling up the stairs. To thank Pap for helping fix her car, Patty went over to support him, step by step up the stairs. But the glass, which could withstand the weight of an elephant, now creaked. The scene shifts to Chris. He saw his girlfriend's message and hurriedly said goodbye to Frank, but before he could step out of the shop, a group of mysterious masked people rushed in, knocked him down, and began smashing everything. Just then a series of gunshots rang out. "They know you're here. Go home, hurry." When Patty got home, Chris was lying in bed pretending to be sick. Just as he thought he had fooled Patty, his phone suddenly received a payment confirmation for the TAC 11, which finally gave him away. Just 3 days of sick leave later, Chris returned to the company and found everything changed. All his colleagues came to work without shoes, just because Pap said doing so could improve efficiency. He angrily took off his shoes and returned to his seat, where he saw his subordinates chatting. It turned out that while Chris was away for 3 days, Pap had arranged for colleagues to finish producing the game and even changed the gameplay and the name. Seeing his brainchild taken over by someone else, Chris angrily wanted to find Yen to demand an explanation, but he didn't expect that in the 3 days he was away, Yen had not only failed to inform him about the company's changes but had also been rapidly promoted, with her own private office. Yen explained that she thought Chris had been under too much pressure lately and was hallucinating because she had checked the news over the past 2 days. The area near Frank's shop had had no robbery at all. Then Yen took Chris's hand and comforted him, telling him not to overthink anymore. But little did they know their every move was now being watched by Pat. This was exactly the reason Yen was suddenly promoted and given a private office. The moment the two held hands was even photographed, and this photo was quickly sent to Patty's phone, Chris's girlfriend. Back to work, the game was about to launch. Yen gave a reported the game to Pat. The data showed the game was rated quite well, but Pat suddenly asked why she and Chris deceived him. Yen had to lie that Chris had been having relationship troubles with his girlfriend, which is why he took leave. I only talked with Patty for a bit, but I feel their wedding may no longer happen. Perhaps they need time apart to reconsider leaving Pat's office. Yen made a 60 call to interview players who had problems. A girl appeared on screen with a nose that seemed injured. She said she would never play this game again. The reason, she got stuck on level 316. After countless tries and still not passing, the girl couldn't restrain her emotions and slammed her head into the window, which is how she got injured. The second player, Frank, was even more agitated. He was also stuck on level 316. So angry, he punched through the glass window and injured his hand. Just then Dana also came to the company. She had just taken her son to the hospital. As expected, her son had also lost control and smashed glass. The boy had also played that game earlier. All of this was clearly not a coincidence. Yen rushed into the office and told Pap about her findings and proposed delaying the game's release. But Pap insisted on releasing it on schedule. After all, the game had received much praise during the testing. More importantly, if it wasn't released, the company would go bankrupt. Yen helplessly had to leave work and go home, but just as she left, Patty in a red dress arrived at the company. Patty went straight to Pap's office, while Chris, still playing the game, had no idea that he was being cheated on. Soon the game entered the marketing phase. Everyone began brainstorming. Yen's idea was praised by Pap. He wanted to bring the elephant from the game into the real world, to have it run thundering through the streets. This idea, though attention-grabbing, was obviously not feasible. But Pap encouraged Yen to boldly give it a try. He even painted a bright future for her. The company needs a leader, Yen. I won't be here forever. I'm just an advisor. Meanwhile, Patty seemed to vanish from the world. Chris couldn't reach her at all. Suddenly his phone rang. The caller was Patty, but the other end was silent. Say something. Can we talk? I can explain to you. Dad, I did go to Perona, but it's not what you think. I shouldn't have lied to you. I've ruined everything. I'm really sorry. Strangely, moreover, Pat, who was always alone, had recently frequently asked his assistant to order food for two. On another note, the plan to fry the elephant also had a lead. Yen contacted a circus, planning to use rescuing wild animals as an excuse to secretly bring the elephant to Los Angeles, and this task was assigned to Pachizi, Yen's ex-boyfriend. It turned out he was an expert in shady matters. Patty was still nowhere to be found. Chris also began to realize that his wedding with his girlfriend probably couldn't happen, and he vented all his anger onto Pat. While drunk at a bar, Chris suddenly remembered the backdoor program he had installed on Pat's phone. He then checked Pat's recent movement history. The starting point of the route was clearly the home of Pat. Driven by curiosity, he drove to that location, but found the place deserted, with only a portable toilet. This pervert drives this far every day. Just to poop? Are you kidding me? Chris, while jogging at night, discovered that the glass of a car parked by the road was shattered, seemingly hit by something heavy. Just as he was still wondering, he saw an elephant on the road. The next day, news of the elephant appearing on the streets of Los Angeles dominated the front pages of the media. Just as Yen thought this was a successful marketing campaign, the following reports left her stunned. It turned out the elephant had died on the way being transported to the animal control center. All efforts now went up in smoke. As for Pat, he went to a robot company called Pterodactyl. Ignoring Yen's calls, after an hour of waiting, Pat was invited into the 11 iOS office. It seemed what had happened to Sangyu was about to repeat. At night, the company's employees threw a celebration party. Although the marketing campaign failed, luckily, the game was well reviewed, so sales still met expectations. However, Yen decided to leave this company and advised Chris to leave with her, but Chris said, "This time I really did something stupid." It turned out that earlier, to steal the phone data of Pat, he had installed a backdoor program into the game, but he hadn't had time to remove the program from the source code before the game was finished and released. This meant he had installed the backdoor program onto the phones of over 1 million users. This was a serious cybercrime. Once discovered, it would mean at least 20 years in prison. Just then Pat, who had disappeared all day, suddenly returned to the company. After driving away Pachisi, who came demanding money, he took a bowl of food and once again went down to the basement. Meanwhile, Chris and Yen watched the crowd celebrating. It was thanks to everyone's efforts that the company was saved. The two couldn't help wanting to rekindle their old romance, but just then the phone of Chris rang. Patty, who had been out of contact for days, sent a message, and it was a message in Korean. After translating, it read, "Please send me more money." "Are you going to locate her phone?" "No, I didn't install tracking software on Patty's phone." "Did she download the game?" The two traced the location provided by the backdoor program to a mansion. The woman before them was Sangyu's mother, and Patty's phone was in her hands. Sangyu's mother said Pat was a good man. He not only found a place for her to stay but also taught her English. Even the phone was a gift from him. It seemed Patty's disappearance really was connected to Pat. Chris angrily returned to the company to settle scores with Pat, and Pat had long been waiting for the two. "Do you know she can type 57 words per minute? She saved me a lot of time." "The basement, go find her. I'll deal with him." Yen immediately went down to the basement. The door was unlocked. Patty was still absorbed in work, completely unaware that Yen was beside her, until Yen took her hand, and Patty snapped out of it. Chris picked up the hammer on the floor and step by step advanced toward Pat. The glass underfoot kept cracking and breaking. Pat's face finally revealed a look of panic. "You're not a hero. You couldn't even win over Yen." Chris angrily smashed the glass floor, making Pat fall from above. Pat hit the ground, motionless, blood pouring from his broken toe. Seeing this, the three hurriedly fled the scene. Clearly Pat wasn't dead. He seemed to vanish overnight. Soon, Yen became the new leader of the company, and Pat had brilliantly fulfilled his role as advisor. He not only revived the company but also drove the employees to develop remarkably. Only Chris left this place. That day he took a toe out of the refrigerator and dropped it into hot water. When he stirred it around once, a golden toe emerged. Clearly Pat was the owner of that golden skeleton. This season's Shituri ends here, but the film still has too many mysteries. To uncover the secrets about Pat, we'll have to wait for season 2. Today's Shituri ends here. Thank you for watching. What did you think of this film? Leave a comment below.